Hey everyone, welcome back. We're taking a deep dive into something pretty interesting today, how the work landscape is changing in Hong Kong. Specifically, we're going to be looking at how Gen Z is, kind of turning things upside down with their attitudes and preferences when it comes to employment.
Yeah, it's a super fascinating topic, especially in a place like Hong Kong, known for its crazy, fast-paced and competitive work culture. It's really a unique case study.
Totally.
Yeah.
And one thing that really stood out to me was this whole trend of Gen Z just like not being into the whole traditional full-time employment thing. Like
Yeah.
it's more than just taking a year off after graduation, right?
Yeah.
It's a much deeper shift in how they view work altogether.
Yeah, exactly.
One report even talked about this idea of tang ping, which basically translates to lying flat. It started in mainland China, but it seems like it's resonating with some Gen Z folks in Hong Kong, too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Tangping is like this rejection of the constant pressure to hustle and achieve all the time. It's a pushback against that whole always be grinding mentality that's so common in a lot of places, especially Hong Kong.
It's like they're saying, hey, we're not going to buy into that anymore.
Right. And it's interesting to see how it's gained traction, particularly after COVID. A lot of people, especially younger folks, had to reassess what was really important to them.
It makes you wonder if the pandemic was like a catalyst for this shift in thinking.
Could be.
And it's not just anecdotal either. Like, we're seeing this reflected in the data. One survey found that more than 40%, that's almost half, of Gen Z respondents in Hong Kong had zero interest in traditional 9-to-5 jobs.
Wow.
Instead, they're all about things like mental health, work-life balance, and, just generally feeling fulfilled.
It's a pretty big difference compared to older generations who are often all about climbing that corporate ladder and prioritizing financial security no matter what.
For sure. And we see this play out in some of the personal stories we came across. There's this one guy, Alex, he's 22, and he works a few days a month at a warehouse. Makes, just enough to get by. But get this. He isn't even looking for a full-time job. Doesn't seem too stressed about his career at all. It's like he's living that tang-ping life to the fullest.
Right. I mean, Alex's story might be a bit on the extreme side, but it does point to this larger trend, especially in Hong Kong, where the cost of living is insane, makes it super hard for young people to achieve those traditional milestones, like buying a home.
Yeah, and that's a huge factor. One survey by HSBC found that, get ready for this, 60% of Gen Z in Hong Kong think owning a home is basically a pipe dream.
60%, that's a lot.
Right, so it's like, if you feel like you're already behind the 8 ball financially, why kill yourself working a job that makes you miserable?
I mean, it makes sense. If those traditional goals, like owning a home, seem totally out of reach, why would you sacrifice your mental health and free time chasing after a career that might not even get you there?
It's interesting because we also came across this phenomenon of full-time children, which are basically young adults who live with their parents and, contribute by doing chores and stuff instead of working full-time.
Yeah.
We read about this freelancer named Ken, who's totally fine with this lifestyle. He loves the flexibility and, just not having that pressure to be on the career fast track.
It definitely challenges our idea of what it means to be an adult. In some cultures, living with your parents as a grown-up might seem weird or even embarrassing. But in Hong Kong, where family is super important and the cost of living is through the roof, it's more acceptable, maybe even practical.
Totally. It's like they're rewriting the rules of adulthood.
Yeah.
But what about those Gen Zers who are actually looking for work? What are they running into? We read about Ada Da, a recent grad who's having a tough time finding a job that aligns with her values. Is that a common experience in Hong Kong?
Sadly, yeah, it is. A lot of Gen Zers are struggling to find jobs that check all the boxes for them. Ada's story shows that disconnect between what they want and what the Hong Kong job market is offering right now.
So what exactly are Gen Zers looking for? What are their must-haves in a job?
Well, from what we've seen, they really prioritize mentorship, having someone to guide them. They also want clear career paths so they can see where they're headed. And of course, work-life balance is non-negotiable.
It's like they're saying, we're not just going to work for a paycheck. We want more out of our jobs.
Exactly. They want to feel value, to know that their work matters. And they want to work for companies that share their values. If they don't find that, they're out. Did you know that the average Gen Zer only stays in a job for 2 years and 3 months?
Seriously? That's crazy. Is that just a lack of commitment or?
I don't think so. It's more about wanting to grow. Gen Z is all about learning new things and gaining new skills, and they don't want to feel stuck.
Makes sense. They grew up in a world where everything is instant, constantly changing. So they're bringing that same energy and desire for change to their careers. It's like they're applying the principles of the gig economy to their entire work life.
Totally. It's not just about finding any job, it's about curating a career that's dynamic and keeps them engaged. And that actually brings us to another really interesting trend, the slasher economy.
Oh yeah, the slashers. Tell me more about that. What's driving this trend, and how does it fit into Gen Z's work preferences?
So slashers are basically people who have multiple part-time jobs or freelance gigs instead of that one traditional 9 to 5. It's a way to diversify your income, explore different interests, and create a work life that gives you more control and flexibility. And that's a big thing for Gen Z, that flexibility and autonomy. Like, they really want to be in charge of their schedules and work on stuff they're passionate about. We saw that with Joyce. She's a makeup artist, and she's got like a bunch of different gigs going on at the same time. So it lets her try out different things in the beauty industry and build a really cool portfolio. It's so different from that typical 9 to 5 grind.
It really shows how entrepreneurial this generation is. They're not waiting for opportunities to come to them. They're making their own.
Mm.
But let's be real for a second. The slasher life isn't always perfect, is it?
Yeah.
There are some downsides, especially when it comes to stuff like benefits and job security and having a stable income.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right. It can be pretty unpredictable, and you often have to give up those perks that come with a traditional job. Building up your client base and juggling a bunch of projects can be tough, and sometimes there are gaps between gigs where you're not making any money.
So it sounds like you need a certain kind of personality to make it work as a slasher, someone who's okay with risk and is really organized and self-motivated.
Definitely. If you're someone who needs stability and doesn't like taking risks, slashing probably isn't for you. But for Gen Z, they grew up in a world that's always changing and unpredictable, so this way of working might actually feel more natural to them. Like, it just makes sense.
That's a good point. It's like they're adapting to the world they live in by being flexible and adaptable in their careers.
Exactly. And speaking of adapting, we can't ignore the economic challenges that Hong Kong is facing right now, especially after the pandemic. The economy has been struggling with slow growth, the property market slumping, and investors leaving.
And that's having a huge impact on the job market. It makes it even tougher for young people trying to get started, especially Gen Z.
Oh, for sure. They're entering a job market that's already super competitive, with fewer jobs available and wages that aren't keeping up with the cost of living. And then you add in the fact that the Hong Kong government has relaxed visa rules, making it easier for people from mainland China to come and work in Hong Kong.
So there's even more competition for jobs, and it's coming from a pool of highly skilled individuals. That's got to be intimidating for Gen Z, who are already facing an uphill battle.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity. This influx of talent from mainland China is putting downward pressure on wages and making it even harder for young people in Hong Kong to get a good start in their careers. It's a really tough situation.
So how are employers reacting to all of this? Are they trying to adapt to what Gen Z wants and needs, or are they sticking to the old ways of doing things?
Well, it seems like some employers are definitely paying attention and making changes to try and attract and keep Gen Z talent. They're realizing that the old ways might not work anymore, and they need to change if they want to stay competitive.
So what kind of changes are we talking about? Are companies starting to be more flexible with work arrangements, offering better mentorship programs, or focusing more on employee well-being? What are some real-world examples?
It's all of that. Like, some companies are embracing this hybrid work model, letting people work remotely a few days a week. And that definitely speaks to Gen Z's desire for work-life balance and flexibility. We're also seeing a lot more emphasis on mentorship programs, which give Gen Z employees the guidance and support they're looking for. And there's a big push for well-being initiatives, like providing mental health resources, mindfulness programs, and flexible work schedules.
That's really good to hear. Are these changes happening everywhere, or is it mostly limited to certain industries or companies that are already pretty forward-thinking?
Well, it's still pretty early, and not every company is on board with this new way of working. But the companies that are making these changes seem to be doing well. We read about Gavin, this young manager who leads a team of Gen Z slashers at a fashion company. He's totally embraced a flat hierarchy, open communication, and flexible work styles.
It sounds like he's leading by example, creating a work environment that actually aligns with what Gen Z values and wants. That's awesome.
Right. And it seems to be working for him. He's built this really motivated and engaged team, and his company is doing great. It just goes to show that embracing these new ways of working can actually be good for both the employer and the employee.
That's a great example of how companies can adapt and succeed in this changing work landscape. But what about the government? Are they doing anything to address the challenges that young workers are facing in Hong Kong?
Well, they definitely know that youth unemployment and the shrinking workforce are big concerns. One report even mentioned that Hong Kong lost something like 111,000 youth workers in just 2022. That's a huge number. A lot of them either left Hong Kong or just stopped working altogether.
That's a really worrying trend. It sounds like there's a lot of disillusionment among young people about their future in Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The government is trying different things to address these issues, but it's a complicated problem, and there aren't any easy answers. They're worried about a growing manpower shortage, especially in important sectors, and they're trying to figure out how to attract and keep young talent while also dealing with the reasons why so many are leaving in the first place.
So it sounds like everyone's feeling the pressure to find solutions, both the government and the employers who are struggling to find and keep good employees.
Absolutely. And it's not just about creating more jobs, it's about creating an environment where young people feel valued, supported, and hopeful about their future in Hong Kong. It's a multifaceted challenge that needs a big picture approach.
It's a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? Gen Z is looking for a different kind of work experience, but those opportunities might not be there if companies and the government don't change with the times.
Exactly. It shows how important it is for everyone to work together, employers, the government, and young people themselves, to create a work landscape that's both fulfilling and sustainable. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone involved.
That's like a giant puzzle with all these interconnected pieces. How Gen Z wants to work, the economic realities of Hong Kong, and how employers and the government are reacting to it all.
It really emphasizes how connected everything is. You can't separate the challenges in the work landscape from the bigger social and economic context. It's about building a society where young people feel like they have a chance to succeed and have a good future.
That's a really important point. It's not just about tweaking policies or offering a few perks. It's about creating a fairer and more supportive environment where everyone can do well. It's about tackling those bigger societal problems that are feeding into this complex situation, right?
Yes, exactly. Things like income inequality and the housing crisis are contributing to this sense of disillusionment that young people are feeling about their prospects.
So where do we go from here? What are some possible solutions or ways forward?
Well, there's no quick fix. It's going to take a multifaceted approach. The government needs to address the root causes of income inequality and the housing crisis. That could mean things like increasing affordable housing options, strengthening social safety nets, and promoting policies that lead to a more equal distribution of wealth.
That makes sense. But what about the work culture in Hong Kong itself? We've talked about the focus on hierarchy, the long working hours, and the pressure to conform. How do we address those things?
That's where a shift in mindset is crucial. It's about moving away from that traditional idea of work as just a way to make money and recognizing that employee well-being, work-life balance, and personal fulfillment are important too.
That's easier said than done, though, right? Especially in a place like Hong Kong, where everything is so fast-paced and competitive.
Oh, definitely. It's going to take effort from both employers and employees. Employers need to be willing to try more flexible work arrangements, create cultures where collaboration and open communication are valued, and prioritize employee development and well-being.
And employees need to speak up about what they need and expect and advocate for the kind of work environment they want to be a part of.
Exactly. It's a two-way street. And it's not just about Gen Z either. These changes would benefit everyone, creating a better and more fulfilling work experience for people of all ages.
It's interesting to think about how all of this will play out in the long run. Will Gen Z's preferences eventually change Hong Kong's work culture? Or will they have to adjust to how things are now?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's kind of like a social experiment. We're seeing this clash between cultural norms that have been around for a long time and the values of this new generation.
It's almost like a tug of war, right?
Yeah.
On one side, you have the forces of stability and tradition, and on the other side, you have this wave of change driven by a generation that's not afraid to question how things have always been done.
Yeah, it's a dynamic tension that's going to shape the future of work in Hong Kong, and maybe even beyond. The outcome is still uncertain, but one thing's for sure, the conversation has started and things are definitely changing.
And it's a conversation that needs to be happening, not just in Hong Kong, but all over the world. Because at the end of the day, we all want to find meaning and purpose in our work and create a life that's both fulfilling and sustainable.
And that's something worth striving for, no matter what generation you belong to or where you live.
So if we were to take a step back and think about the key takeaways from this deep dive, what would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the future of work isn't set in stone. It's being shaped right now by the choices we make as individuals, organizations, and as a society. Gen Z is asking important questions about what work should look like in the 21st century, and their preferences are making us rethink our old assumptions about the relationship between work and life.
It's a call to action, isn't it? A reminder that we have the power to create the kind of work experience we want. But it takes a willingness to challenge the status quo and embrace new ways of thinking.
Exactly. And it's not just about adapting to Gen Z, it's about creating a work culture that works for everyone. A culture that prioritizes well being, encourages creativity, and values individual contributions.
You're right. It's not about favoring one generation over another. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone.
It's about creating workplaces where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered to do their best work. And that's what will ultimately drive innovation, productivity, and long-term success.
So if you could leave our listener with one final thought-provoking question, what would it be?
I think the most important question we can ask ourselves is this: what role do we want work to play in our lives? Is it just a way to make money and pay the bills? Or can it be something more, something that gives us purpose, fulfillment, and connection?
That's a really powerful question, and it's one that we all need to think about.
Once we've figured out the answer to that question, we can start making choices that align with our values and create a work experience that truly reflects who we are and what we want to accomplish.
That's a great point. The traditional idea of climbing the career ladder just doesn't seem as relevant anymore in today's world. It's more about creating your own path, trying different things, and developing a variety of skills that you can use in different situations.
Right. And don't be afraid to experiment, take some risks, and try new things. The slasher economy shows that people are looking for more flexibility and autonomy in their work. It might not be the right choice for everyone, but it's definitely shaking things up and making us rethink how we view work.
And who knows? Maybe what we're seeing in Hong Kong is a sign of what's to come in other parts of the world. As globalization and technology continue to break down barriers, Gen Z's values and preferences are likely to have a big impact across different industries and cultures.
It's an exciting time to be thinking about the future of work. There are challenges, for sure, but there are also incredible opportunities for innovation and creativity. And it's up to all of us to shape that future in a way that benefits both individuals and society as a whole.
Well said. That wraps up our deep dive into the changing work landscape in Hong Kong. We hope this conversation has given you some new things to think about and inspired you to approach your own work experience in a different way.
Remember, the future of work isn't something that just happens to us. We all have a role to play, and the decisions we make today will shape the world of work for future generations. So go out there, explore your options, and find something you're truly passionate about.
Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious. It really does feel like we're at a turning point, right? Like the old ways of working are being questioned, and there's this like exciting energy, but also a little bit scary, So
Yeah.
many possibilities.
Yeah, totally. And it's not even just about Gen Z. It's like their preferences and expectations are kind of pushing forward trends that were already happening,
Yeah.
making all of us rethink what work means in our lives.
It just hit me. This whole conversation about work is really a conversation about values, isn't it?
Hmm.
Like what matters most to us? What do we want our lives to be like? And how can work fit into that, instead of taking away from it?
That's a really good point. It's about finding that balance
Yeah.
between like doing something fulfilling and still being able to, pay the bills
Hmm.
and figuring out how to build a society that supports both of those things.
Exactly. It's like recognizing that work is just one part of our lives
Yeah.
and it needs to fit in with everything else, our families, our communities, the stuff we're passionate about.
Definitely. And there's no one right answer, right? What works for one person might not work for someone else. It's about having a system that's flexible enough to like work for everyone.
So it's about giving people the power to create work lives that actually match their values and what they
Mhm.
want to achieve. And that means changing how we think, both individually and as a society.
Absolutely. It's about moving away from this idea that work has to be this like horrible grind, a constant source of stress. It's about reclaiming work as something that can be enjoyable, something that has meaning, even a way to grow as a person.
I love that. It's like instead of work-life balance, it's more like work-life integration, creating a life where your work actually makes you feel better, not worse.
That's a great way to put it. And that's something worth working towards.
Well, on that inspiring note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into how the work landscape is changing in Hong Kong.
It's been a really interesting discussion. Lots of food for thought.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about how Gen Z's attitudes are evolving, the whole slasher economy thing, the economic problems Hong Kong is facing, and how both employers and the government are responding.
And we also talked about those bigger issues that are affecting the future of work everywhere, not just in Hong Kong.
So, to our listeners, as we say goodbye, we'll leave you with this final thought. What does work mean to you? What kind of work life do you want to create for yourself? And what can you do, like right now, today, to start making that happen?
Remember, the future of work is in your hands. Be brave, be curious, and never stop exploring all the different possibilities out there.
Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.